Hey, Kevin here, top 100 financial advisor and best-selling author, and we are here to talk about the stock market. Today we want to tackle Draftkings. Y'all asked me what my thoughts were on Draftkings. Do I think it's a good stock? I'm going to answer that here. There are a lot of points that I think investors should know, and I want you to take this as a Cliff Notes version. So what are some things that I spotted? You can take that and make your own investing decision. This is not investing advice. This is just, again, a Cliff Notes, Spark Notes version of what's going on, what things stood out to me, and you can take that and run with it. But I also want this to be a conversation. I want to know what you think about DraftKings. Have you invested in it, and what do you see for its future as well? So let's make this a community. Let's make this a conversation, and make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons. So let's go ahead and get into it. So for those that don't know, let's kind of take a step back. DraftKings went public in 2019 via SPAC. Special Purpose Acquisition Company is essentially what most people call a blank check company. That's what a SPAC is. A SPAC is called a blank check company. Basically, a company forms. They don't do anything. They're just there, and their only purpose is to acquire another company and go public. The great thing for companies like DraftKings is that they kind of get away with not disclosing all the stuff that you would have had to do to go public through a normal process. Some people call it sketchy. I can kind of lean towards that a bit, but I don't think DraftKings itself is sketchy. You can go to Nikola and several other companies that you know of right now that went through that SPAC process. Some have went well, some have not, but that's an entirely different video. That being the case, they went public in 2019, so they've only been out in terms of the stock market for about 2 years. That to me is a bit of a risk because I don't have enough history to really judge how well a company should perform or what my expectations should be from an investor perspective. So it's a little bit of a risk. I'll also talk about pricing and how the price is moving here in a second, but I just want to get a lot of the facts of the case out of the way, if you will. So we know right now that 26 states have legalized sports betting in some degree, or sports gambling in some degree, which is good for DraftKings. 3 states had just added it. I think it was 23, now it's 26 in late 2020. Those states were Louisiana, South Dakota, and Maryland had just added it, which is great for DraftKings and great, I think, for investors because it shows that the company can still grow. They have potential, and I think that is amazing for a company like DraftKings. The other good things, I think the sports calendar is also lining up quite well for them too. COVID is, well, you got the Delta variant, that's a concern, right? But you've got the Olympics. They've already put out some stuff about how you can bet on the Olympics. So you've got that. You've got expanding states. You've got other states. I think Colorado, if I'm not mistaken, is one of those that is supposed to vote on that at some point this year. The article that I looked at that mentioned Colorado was November 2020. So that may or may not have happened already. Haven't gotten that far into the research. But we do know, again, they have room to expand. The downside, and which is one of the reasons why the stock is down about 7% in the last 6 months, is they are spending a lot of money on marketing. As you already know, right, profit equals how much you're bringing in, revenue minus expenses. And their expenses are quite high when it comes to marketing. They say that this is not going to be something that's going to last forever. They are relatively early in the stock market phase over the last few years. Especially with COVID, they said, look, we really wanted to spend a lot of money to have people know our name, to get on our services, to spend money with us, so on and so forth. And that does make a lot of sense because we know and we expect that this is not going to be an expense that continues over time. That's going to be, well, let me not say continues. Yes, there is a market, but it's not going to continue at this rate. They're not going to spend as much for forever. So we know that bill is going to be reduced a bit, and we know that based on what we've seen and the proliferation or the growth of things like fantasy football and all that, we can say that your revenue base is pretty consistent. You're expanding. I think your revenue is probably going to grow, and your marketing expenses will shrink. That tells me that this is a good business to be in and might work for the long term. If we go back 1 year, if you take a step back and for an entire year, the stock is up 30%. Again, I mentioned the last 6 months, it's down almost 7%. That part of it isn't as exciting for me for the short term. So for me, if I were looking into this and I know that I can buy DraftKings, or I can continue to DCA, dollar cost average, and put in money on a regular basis, I would expect to kind of get in and sit in it for at least 2 years or more before I really start to see something big happen. I'm not entirely sure that is going to be the best stock this year. I'm not entirely sure it's going to be the best stock between now and the end of the year. I think you've got way too many options to choose from that are doing well right now versus one that we hope gets back to what it was doing. I think that's what it really comes down to for me. For example, if you go back and look, and I know we talked about chart reading, this is one we can all look at, one of the simplest ones. So if you are watching this on your computer, or maybe you're watching this on your phone or wherever, you can pause the video or you can do it at the same time, depending on what type of phone you got. If you go to your public app right now, or whatever app you're using, and go and look at any chart for DraftKings and hit the max button. You get max or you get 5 years, because the company's only 2 years old from a stock market perspective. It will show you that in March of 2020, March of 2021, and I think it was March 2015, you'll see that DraftKings pretty much peaked at like $70 a share. Today, it is like $49 a share. Today, it being, July 23rd. So it's off quite a ways from its most recent high this year, and it kind of spikes and falls pretty sharply. Spikes and then falls pretty sharply. So yes, you could quote unquote buy low. That's not exactly what I would do right now until I start to see it move in the right direction. For me, if I were going to jump into it, once it hits about $54, $55, that's when I say, okay, this is moving upward. I know what I know, all the stuff we talked about. Now I'm going to go ahead and get into it, because this stock could continue to fall for all we know. That could happen. It could be 49 right now on Friday, and then we come back next Friday and it's at, I don't know, 40. I don't know how quickly the stock is going to move. However, I would put an alert out if this is a company you want to buy. If it's not, then you can leave it alone. But I would say, oh look, you're at 55. Now I know it's moving in the right direction. I'm going to hop in this, and I know I'm going to wait 2 or 3 years to really start to see that growth as sports gambling continues to grow across the country, as they reduce those marketing expenses and continue to bring in the same, if not more, revenue in the future. So that's how I personally would view DraftKings. And let me check my notes. I want to make sure I caught all of the top points that I saw, and I believe so. Yeah, so those were my main points. They're expanding. I think that's good. They're down this year, but I think that's also an opportunity for you. I have like what my plan would be jumping into it. And I think that's extremely important, is that whether you want to buy DraftKings or not, personally, I'm staying out of it. I think there are better stocks for right now. I'm not looking necessarily. I already got my stocks for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook. That's not special, but like my long-term stuff is locked, and it's not going nowhere, right? I'm not looking necessarily for the next 2 years, because the Fords, I'm trying to think of something else that's not Capital One, but the Fords, Capital One, O'Reilly, all that stuff, Adobe, out in 6 months or at the end of this year, we will reevaluate and decide if it's going to get to that next level, right? So we'll see about those. But if I really like DraftKings, more familiar with their business, that would be my plan. But you do want to have a plan. Whatever that plan is, you do want to have one. My plan would be, holla at me when you hit the $55 a share mark, then I would invest, and then I'll talk to you in 2023. That would be my plan if I were going to jump into something like this. I just think there are other stocks that are much better, Google being one of them, as well as other companies that aren't necessarily in that particular space. But another positive thing, I don't know if I mentioned already, you got the Olympics happening right now. You've got the end of baseball season coming up. It's not coming up, it's still July. But you got football season. You've got a lot of college football coming up. within the next few weeks, several weeks rather. So there's a good case. There's a good case for it to succeed in the short term, but I just think there are a lot more opportunities between now and the end of the year to do very, very. Oh, and then I would say between now and the end of the year, there are plenty of stocks I think will do better. Now, if we're talking 2 or 3 years, that's going to be a harder call to make. I think DraftKings could really be set up well for that time frame. It all depends on what you're comparing it with. All right, so that is it for me. Let me know what you think in the comments about DraftKings. Like it, don't like it, anything that stood out, concerned about it, or do you think it would be a good stock to add? One of the reasons we brought this up is because it's one of the top 50 most popular stocks held by millennial and Gen Z investors. If I remember correctly, there were somewhere between 40 to 50. That's what I thought they were. I mean, I'm just remembering the picture that I looked at. I know for a fact they weren't in the top 10. So, again, let me know what you guys think about it. I'm curious because y'all teach me as well. It's a conversation, a classroom, if you will. So, love to hear your thoughts and what you think about it. All right, that's it for me. Talk to you guys later. Bye.